Sweeney Gray. I'm at the Department of Political Science at the University of the West Indies. I am talking to the head of the Department of Political Science, Dr. Bishnu Ragoonath, about the future of state media. As you may well be aware, CNMG and GISL is currently doing a public consultation on the future of state media. And we thought it was very important to get the opinions of various stakeholders. And as one of Trinidad and Tobago's leading political scientists, we really wanted to get Dr. Ragoonath's opinion on the future of state media. Dr. Ragoonath, thank you so much for talking with us. Do you think that the state should have a role in media?
Definitely the state should have a role in media. The media, from the state's perspective, is important to ensure that state policies, governmental policies, are elaborated and broadcast to the wider society. But again, state media is not limited to simply be a propaganda machine for the state or for the government. It is supposed to be used in a manner that will bring forward not only information of what the government is doing, but rather of what is necessary and needed within the wider society.
I do think in a lot of the discourse about the future of state media, we have been confusing state and government and using those two terms interchangeably. Would you be able to give us a give us some sort of clarity on what those words actually mean? Like, is there a difference between state media and if it differs to government media?
Okay. From the perspective of government media, when we say government media, we are normally looking at it as if it's the mouthpiece of the government. And when we say the mouthpiece of the government is really the ruling party. When we talk about state media, we want to go beyond the being a mouthpiece for the government or the ruling party. We make sure when we talk about state media, we are saying, for instance, that government is not necessarily using the narrow sense of only the ruling party. If we know our constitution in Trinidad and Tobago, for instance, yes, the government must be made up of a Prime Minister, the Attorney General, but it also requires a leader of the opposition to ensure that the government is fully constituted, so that we can have the parliamentary functions functioning effectively. To that extent, therefore, government is not to be used in the narrow sense of the ruling party. And it is in that wider sense that we talk about state media. The state media, therefore, is one which is supposed to not only be the mouthpiece of the ruling party, but also that notion that it could bring forth and allow the views and opinions of the non-ruling party actors within the state who has a stake in the game.
As a political science working primarily in Trinidad and Tobago, do you think that we are mature enough of a society to have a proper state media in the proper sense?
Well, we are mature enough. The only challenge, however, is simply the people who manage and run the system. They are the ones who cause the problems, in that they are the ones who direct people as to what they could do and what they cannot do, what they could show and what they cannot show. And that is the real challenge. If I may take, for instance, they are within the region, and I don't work primarily in Trinidad, I work throughout the Caribbean region.
Right.
And when we work throughout the Caribbean region, what we will find out is that state medias, even in smaller countries, in less developed countries than Trinidad and Tobago, have been used effectively to produce and to ensure that the information that is required outside there is actually getting out to the wider population. Take, for instance, the issue with elections. In some of the other countries in the Caribbean, Antigua and Barbuda, for instance, it is legislated within the rules of the state media that when it comes to election time, all political parties must get free broadcast time. That in itself suggests that the state media has to ensure that not only the ruling party has that access, but rather all the political parties have access, because some of the political parties simply cannot afford to buy airtime in television or radio. And that is where the state media comes in, because the state media allows the dissemination of information throughout the society.
What would you like to see being covered on media in Trinidad and Tobago? Are you satisfied with how we're covering political issues, the level of discourse, maybe the historical reporting or programs? Are you satisfied with what we're doing with the political content, our history, our future, the analysis?
To some extent, what you are doing in state media is really what is required. But one of the things that we need to translate from what is actually being broadcast on state media to what is actually being understood outside there. I remember telling a minister at one point in time, when he told me, he says, what do you think of all the work I've been doing? And I said, what have you been doing? He said, but it's being shown daily on state media. And I said, but we don't look at state media. We turn off state media whenever there's a program like that coming on. And that is where the state media now has to find interesting ways to put these messages across. State media, for instance, in some of the countries, in fact, we are lucky, we have a separate parliamentary channel. In other countries, for instance, the parliament is broadcast on the state media. In fact, I think we do it too, to some extent. And we have used the state media for various types of important issues, commissions of inquiries and so forth. And those are important events. I don't know how many people actually look at them, but I know for a fact that when I look at the state media and I looked at the commission of inquiries, I mean, there's so much information that is coming out of there. And the question is, how are people accepting it? Is the state media, what are people's opinions of state media? And are they thinking that state media is only a mouthpiece for the government, rather than this disseminating of information of all types of activities, all types of issues? That, I think, is where the discussion on state media has to go. Not necessarily on what it has to show, because I think it's doing a very good job at this point in time, but rather on how can it attract a viewership where people will actually want to look at state media compared to some of the other stations.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ragoonauth, for your time and your contribution. Really appreciate talking to you on this issue.